Hello chaps, welcome to John Robson Bass Tuition as it is today. As always, I do hope you're well. Now then, this is a response to quite a few requests that I've had from guitarists who, like me, do a little bit of home recording and want to know a little bit more about how to play bass on their recordings, or maybe they've got a gig in a band where they're having to switch from guitar to bass or whatever, and people are just asking for a little bit of guidance on the subject. Now, before we start, I will just hold my hands up and say that I am not an accomplished bass player, so this isn't a video teaching you how to be the next Jaco Pastorius or Mark King or whatever. This is just basically how to get a toe in the water of how to play some kind of basic but worthwhile and usable bass lines. And I guess the first thing that happens when guitarists pick up a bass is that they start to follow this kind of logic. Okay, this is a bass. I'm not going to be playing chords here, I'm not going to be strumming chords, I'm going to be playing one note after another, which is probably going to be based on a scale of some sort, so that's a bit like lead guitar. Yeah, I can do that, and they usually end up sounding something a little bit like this. Which, as you can clearly hear, just doesn't work. You have to think in a little bit of a different way when you're playing the bass, because it is a different instrument. So the first thing we're going to acknowledge is the fact that the bass player and the drummer are often referred to as the rhythm section of the band. And there's a big clue there, because what you need to do as a bass player is lock in with the drums. Specifically the bass drum part of the kit. So it would be useful, I guess, to start off by looking at whereabouts the bass drum is landing in any particular rhythm. Here's the rhythm, the drum track from that example you just heard, and you'll be able to spot where the bass drum is landing within the count. Okay, next thing you do is play your bass notes in the same part of the rhythm, the same part of the count where the bass drum is landing. You can stray a little bit either side of it, but those are your main focal points for where your bass notes want to be landing. A little bit like this maybe. So once you've got that rhythmic element of it sorted, it's time to start thinking about the chords. Now, the bass player does play the chords. He plays, or he or she, I should say, plays the chord sequence just as much as the guitar player, the rhythm guitarist, does. But instead of strumming chord shapes, you're going to be using arpeggios on the neck. And much like with the guitar, where you have certain chord shapes that you will go to and move up and down the neck, like bar chords for example, and use all of the time, well, bass players have similar patterns and shapes that they're going to fall back on all the time. Most of the time you're going to be using major and minor chords, so here are some major and minor chord shapes that you can use on the bass. And if we use those chord shapes to put together a bass line for that chord sequence you heard back earlier on, then you might end up with something like this. And that is fine as it goes, but there's a lot more that you can do. There are more possibilities. The more you start to look into what notes are actually in the chords, you can begin to see a way that the bass can not just mirror the chord sequence, but can also complement it as well. Here's a bit of information on that. Okay, here once again is the chord progression that we're looking at, and you can play a bass line underneath these chords, which is just based around the arpeggio and chord shapes that we've already seen. But if you delve a little bit deeper and actually look at what notes are in the chords, then you begin to notice something quite interesting. In this chord progression, there is a chromatic descending line. Basically a sequence of notes going from a note in one chord to a note in the next chord, which descend by 1 fret stages each time. This is called a line cliché, by the way, and this is what it looks and sounds like. Now, on its own, that just sounds a little bit unfocused. It sounds exactly like what you would expect when you hear a group of notes descending by 1 fret at a time. However, when we put the chords over the top of it, everything suddenly starts to make sense. A little bit like this. And now let's hear what that sounds like when we actually play it with the track that we heard earlier. For the A chord at the end, which isn't part of the line cliché, I'm just going to go back to using an A major chord arpeggio kind of thing that we looked at earlier. And now here's a full track using that line cliché idea that we explored in that little clip, as well as like a B section to the tune where I'm using the chord shape arpeggio patterns that we looked at earlier to kind of provide a little bit of contrast, and the whole thing sounds like this. And there you have it. That is pretty much how my mind operates when I'm thinking about playing the bass. One thing I will just mention is that because you're having to think in a slightly more note-aware way when you're playing bass, you're thinking about what notes are in chords, you're thinking about where those notes are on the fretboard. You're also thinking in terms of playing rhythmically, playing not just strumming chords rhythmically, but playing single notes in a rhythmic fashion. All of these are valuable skills that you can then take away with you and apply to your six-string escapades, and you will notice something of an improvement in your lead playing and your ability to put riffs together, all of that kind of stuff. It's certainly the case with my own experience that suddenly my lead guitar playing got a lot more fluent and developed more depth and more melody, I guess, as I kind of took on board what I'd learned from playing the bass. So there you go. I will just mention, before I wrap up for today, the fact that there are a couple of guitars for sale. There's this one here. This is, excuse me while I just put this bass down. This is a Harley Benton SC1000. It's a fantastic rock and metal guitar. It's very, very closely based upon the ESP Eclipse models. It's got active pickups, it's got an action that just encourages you to shred all over the place, and it sounds an absolute demon with the high gain turned up on your amp. So if you want to own this guitar, then you've got one more day left to get your bids into me, and then the winning bidder will be notified. And what you then do, if you are the winning bidder, is you make a bid, or you make a payment of the amount that you bid to Zoe's Place Baby Hospice, which is a charity in Middlesbrough which provides palliative, respite and end-of-life care to children under 5 with terminal illnesses. Show me confirmation of your bid, and I will then send you the guitar. And if that guitar isn't quite your cup of tea, then excuse me while I just grab a hold of this one. If you want to own a guitar that looks a lot like this, not this one, this one is mine. Basically this is a Harley Benton Fusion Pro in Bengal finish. I reviewed one of these a couple of weeks ago, and I was so taken with it that I bought one for myself. This one's mine. The one that will be going out to the winner of this auction is already boxed up and ready to ship. So if you want to own a guitar very much like this, then once again get your bids in exactly the same way. Email me your bid for either guitar to the email address you can see on screen, or the one that you'll see at the end of the video, both the same email address. So just send your bids to that address, and once again I notify the winning bidder, and then they make the donation and then get sent the guitar. If you are bidding from outside the UK, then please contact me first, because we may need to have a conversation about shipping costs and so on, because sending guitars internationally can be quite pricey, it seems. And I'll also put a link to both video reviews of this, not this guitar, but this model of guitar, and this one in the description box below. So if you want to see what all the fuss is about with those guitars, then just check out those reviews. And if you've enjoyed this video, then please hit the subscribe button, the like button, the notification bell, all the usual stuff, and that way you'll never miss another one of these videos. And finally, one for me, if you would like some tailored one-to-one guitar, or I guess bass tuition these days, then give me a shout via the details at the end of this video. If you live on Teesside in the northeast of England, you can come along for a face-to-face lesson. Or wherever you are in the world, you can have a lesson via Skype, and whichever way you do it, your first lesson is of course free, so you've got nothing at all to lose. And with that, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time around. Bye for now, folks.